have a question for you. What do you do when you're forced into a change? Something you didn't expect to occur, you didn't want it to happen, but now you're in it. You have no choice. Well, I can tell you that you adapt, first of all. That's one thing you have to do. You grieve any losses that occur. And hopefully, you can think about the fact that the change is temporary. But if not, well, that's a different set of life responses, isn't it? Definitely, you find new ways to do life and you learn to incorporate new habits. Mhm. So, I have a funny story for you, or not. I'm going to read from my notes because it's more succinct that way. Well, I was working at my part time job. Now, some of us seniors, we need that in order to manage. I work part time for a greeting card company. Now, I was opening up a large box of cards. These boxes weigh about 30, 50 pounds. I put them up on a cart and you open up the side flap. So it's about 2 feet by 3 feet in depth or diameter. Now, I was following protocol. I've done this for 5 years. On the box, there's a little mark up in the corner. It says start here, and then they have the green line that goes down and around the flap. Well, you create a flap by opening up around the edge. I had a brand new box cutter, and when I bought it, my friend said, "Now be careful, those things are really sharp." And she was right. So I started cutting at the start here edge, and unfortunately, it slipped right across my hand. Well, all I could see was just all the blood spurting out. So immediately I applied pressure. I didn't even know how deep or long the cut was, but I knew it was serious. It felt like it had touched the bone. I went over to the checkout counter because I knew that's where I could find a staff member. And I asked her, "Do we have a cloth or something? I've cut my hand really bad." So she grabbed a box of tissues and we started applying it. And they realized this is not going to work. Then she called her coworker over who actually had been studying to be a nurse. And we asked for a first aid kit. So they led me into the back room. And this girl, Pam, I'm going to give you her name. She was so great. She just started doing all the stuff. I was lightheaded and sort of a little bit disoriented. That's a shock that occurs when your body has a major injury. And she sat me down, started cleaning up the wound, bandaged it best she could, gave me some sugar, and made sure I had a way home. She wanted to call an ambulance, but I didn't want that because we have to pay for those things. And besides that, my husband was hanging out with me while I worked. So he drove me up to Emerge. So everything was looked after appropriately at emergency. Of course, there's a 2 hour wait. But the nurse had said, keep your hand up above your heart, and hopefully that slows down the blood flow, which it did. They re-bandaged it because they had to look at it and see how deep it was and write it into their reports. And then I had a really, really good doctor. He looked after me. So I share this story because there's a few life principles at play here that I thought you might benefit by. You see, sometimes we're in the process of living life and something happens to us, a curve, a bend in the road, something happens. In my case, a wound on my hand and 7 stitches later, making my hand basically unusable for a week. So while the initial cut would hopefully begin to heal together, I'm not at that week yet. A week is not a long time in the big picture of life, but it makes me realize that life throws us these curves and we need to adapt. There are a few things I can't do for a while, like wash dishes. Well, who cares there? I can't lift anything with weights. Basically, just don't use the hand. But the worst thing for me is that I can't knit right now. I have to keep the hand as immobile as possible to allow the two edges to come together and heal. So for me, that's a big thing because I spend hours every day knitting and I enjoy it. I like the challenge of the patterns. I like learning new skills as I'm knitting. And so that was a hardship. For several days, I need to change my habits. You see, life is like that for many of us. We go merrily on our way, and then, as mentioned, life throws us a curve. Sometimes it's a big curve, sometimes small. So, back to the beginning question, what do you do when life forces a change? Here's the principles. You grieve, you allow yourself to feel sad over any changes that occur in your routine or anything that you may have lost. Grieving is an important aspect to life. You will find that life challenges often bring you to a place of grieving loss. It's inevitable. We will experience loss in life. We adapt and we adjust. When we are faced with various life challenges and changes, in many respects, it's a time when we find out how resilient we are. During those times, we may be required to develop even more resiliency. We change our routines, we find new ways to do things because you're forced into that. Essentially, we exercise our creative abilities in this adaptation. We can console ourselves with the idea that many changes are temporary. Hopefully, they are. And the healing of my hand, for example, is a temporary circumstance. Knowing that there's an end means that I can endure almost anything, endure the pain of the healing. I can, because I just know it's not going to be forever. So sometimes we're faced with life challenges and we can't see an end. We don't know where it is. And that can be a huge stressor in itself. What we do in that situation is we imagine an end. What you get in the end may not quite be what you imagined, but the imagined helps you and it helps you cope as you work your way through things. So, what do you do when you're forced into a change? You adapt, you grieve your losses, you realize that change is temporary, hopefully. You find new ways of doing life and you learn to incorporate new habits. So, that's it in a nutshell. Tell me about your life challenges, the changes you face, and how you've managed to cope. And if you don't want to tell me, that's fine, but reflect on that because reflecting on our life is the place where I think we dig a little deeper and find out just what our strengths are. And we can pat ourselves on the back even for how well we've managed or challenge ourselves to manage better. So share your stories. Most of all, how is your life now? Think on that, and if you feel inclined, go ahead and share. Thanks for listening in. I'm glad you were here. Eventually, our camping season is coming up, so stay tuned.